What we're looking at here is footage from the Russian Ministry of Defense, which you can tell from the coat of arms up the top right of the screen. What it's showing us is an Su-34 fighter bomber preparing for takeoff at an airfield in an undisclosed part of Russia, and slung under its wings are the weapons it will use for this mission. 4 deadly little devices known as glide bombs. The bomber is headed for Ukraine to attack a command center somewhere in southern Donetsk. These weapons are the latest to be deployed in Russia's war on Ukraine. They can weigh up to 1.5 tons, fly up to 40 miles, and explode with such force that they can level buildings, blow up bunkers, and leave survivors with brain injuries. If we come in for a closer look, we can see these actually aren't brand new weapons at all. They're old weapons with a new piece of kit attached. The old bit is the bomb itself, in this case an FAB-500M62. FAB is an acronym translating to High Explosive Aviation Bomb. The 500 indicates the weight, in this case 500 kilograms, but they come in both smaller and bigger sizes. The smallest weigh 250 kgs, and the largest ones currently in use weigh 1,500 or 1.5 tons. But Russia is working on even bigger ones, up to 3 tons. And 62 indicates the year it was made, in this case 1962, when the Soviet Union was still in charge. Originally, this was a dumb bomb, which doesn't mean that it came last in its class in school. It means it isn't guided, like a smart bomb, and was designed to be dropped from a bomber straight downwards onto a target below. But not anymore, which is where the new part comes in. Because strapped to this bomb, like a backpack, is what Russia calls a Universal Planning and Correction Module, or UMPK for short. It contains a GPS tracker, which allows the Russians to program it to hit targets that the bomber pilot cannot see, fins on the tail to steer it and stabilize it, and 2 pop-out wings which allow it to glide for miles before smashing into the target and exploding. Right now, the bombs are strapped to hard points under the jet's wings with the UMPK facing downwards. But if you watch this moment, the pilots release the bombs and they roll over, so the kit is facing upwards. The wings then pop out and the GPS takes over, meaning the bombs will glide to their target, in this case a Ukrainian command post, before slamming into it. That means the Russian pilots don't have to cross into Ukrainian airspace during the bombing run, where they might get shot down. But you can see them firing flares here, just to make sure. Because these bombs are packed with huge amounts of explosives, the damage they cause when they hit can be extreme. They're not as accurate as guided missiles or artillery, so they're no use against mobile targets, but they can easily demolish multi-story buildings and reinforce bunkers. Bombs just like these were used heavily in the final days of the fight for Avdiivka, which Russia eventually captured. Glide bombs may be a new feature in Russia's war in Ukraine, but they've got a legacy that stretches all the way back to the Second World War. The very first glide bombs to be used were developed by the Nazis. The Fritz X was a 1,400 kilogram armor-piercing bomb that was converted into a guided bomb by fitting a radio control unit to the tail and fins on the side. It was designed to destroy ships, which were so heavily defended the bombers couldn't get near them, but was slow and large enough for the glide bombs to target. The USS Savannah was badly damaged by Fritz bombs during the Allied attack on Salerno in Italy in 1943, along with Britain's HMS Warspite. An Italian warship Roma, which was in the process of surrendering to the Allies at the time, was blown to bits. Though the weapon did not prove decisive for the Nazis, the idea caught on, and by the end of the war, America and Japan had their own versions, while Britain and the Soviets were trying to develop them. The role of attacking ships would eventually be taken over by missiles, but glide bombs found another use in attacking heavily defended ground targets. One of the most common in use today is the JDAM, which stands for Joint Direct Attack Munition, because it was jointly developed by the US Air Force and Navy. It looks a little bit like the Russian UMPK, but more sophisticated, and consists of a tail section which replaces the bomb's old fins at the back and contains the GPS guidance system. There's also a strake kit, which sits around the body of the bomb and helps stabilize it in the air. It has been used in dozens of wars, including the Afghan War, Iraq War, Libya, Syria, and by the IDF against Hamas in Gaza. All these conflicts have one thing in common. They involve countries with large air forces attacking terror groups with few anti-air defences, but which were hidden among civilians. Bombing was therefore a low-risk, high-reward strategy, but the bombs needed to be accurate enough to avoid the civilians. Missiles would have worked, but they cost multiple millions of dollars each and are targeting equipment worth a fraction of that, which is where the glide bombs come in. They proved adept at destroying buildings, bunkers, and bases, and did so at a fraction of the cost of using guided missiles. In late 2022, the JDAM was also given to Ukraine. The Ukrainians got a version called the JDAM ER, or Extended Range, which features pop-out wings that triple the distance it can fly. It was used for the first time in early 2023 during the Battle of Bakhmut. Just like in the Middle East, the bomb proved adept at destroying hardened targets like bunkers and buildings the Russians were hiding in. And it could do so with enough accuracy to avoid hitting people still in the city or nearby Ukrainian troops. The tactic was not decisive, and Ukraine eventually lost Bakhmut, but it was effective enough that Russia began copying it. Putin's generals are now using their own glide bombs to demolish Ukrainian defences and help their troops advance, all while trying to avoid the bloodbath that Bakhmut became. The bombs helped decide the Battle of Avdiivka in favour of the Russians. The question now is, can Ukraine find a way to stop them, or will they lead to yet more Russian advances? That's all the information I got from watching this tape, but I wanted to know more, so I brought the footage to an expert.
Looks like 4 Fab 500, so 500 kilogram bombs with UPMK wing kits, so glide bomb kits attached to a Sukhoi 34M. So this is a Russian fighter bomber. Closest equivalent would probably be the Western F-15E Strike Eagle. This is the kind of one of the 2 standard platforms that the Russians use regularly for dropping glide bombs and also launching other standoff air-to-ground munitions towards Ukrainian lines. Interestingly, they're seem to be going at a relatively horizontal angle. So starting quite high suggests they're quite a long way from the lines, so very high altitude. The 4 bombs released there in a salvo, deploying their wing kits. Looks like a UAV feed for the impact. Russians have essentially struggled to find a particularly impactful way to use the majority of their fighter fleets since the start of the war, because they've not been able to gain air superiority over Ukraine, because they've not been able to find, suppress and destroy those Ukrainian ground-based air defense systems, so the SAM systems. There's limits to how many targets you can hit if they're, for example, relying on air-launched cruise missiles. Those are very, very expensive. They can only hit fixed targets. Russia's been using lots and lots of air-launched cruise missiles from its bomber fleet anyway. So the fighters have had a limited impact there. In terms of closer range missiles with TV or laser guidance, that requires the launch aircraft to get close and therefore has led to losses in for example, their Sukhoi 34 fleet from Ukrainian SAMs. What the glide bombs have given them is a way to use a stock of munitions of which they have huge quantities. So the Fab series of 500 kilogram and 1,500 kilograms, very heavy demolition bombs essentially. They have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these weapons dating back to probably pre-Vietnam. And so they're essentially free. They don't cost much. By attaching these UPMK wing kits to them, and then launching from a high altitude and speed with a fighter or a fighter bomber, they can essentially bombard fixed locations, particularly in areas where the Ukrainians are dug in a salient. So for example, as we saw in Avdiivka before the withdrawal. So where the Russians, the mission planning is pretty easy. They know exactly where they're targeting. So they can essentially just pump out sorties with these wing kit equipped glide bombs at a low cost with a very heavy weight of explosive for each impact compared to an artillery shell.
Launching these bombs back from the front line seems like a huge advantage, but what I wanted to know is what happens when the glide kit fails over Russian territory.
The fuses on the Fab adaptations will be pretty rudimentary. So at the point where the bomb is released, it will be live. And so if the glide kit fails or it doesn't reach its target and falls short, there will be a large hole somewhere, possibly in Russian occupied territory. And we have consistently seen Russian air-launched munitions failures resulting in weapons dropping on Russian soil as well as Russian occupied territory. So, for example, there have been a number of KH-101 series air-launched cruise missiles being dropped from Russian bombers, fired from Russian bombers over Russia itself, which have failed and have fallen in Russian territory and been photographed and released on Telegram and things. That's one of the reasons why, particularly early on in the war, the Russian bombers were often flying a very long way to launch over the Caspian Sea and flying these longer routes for the missiles, presumably so that if the motor didn't fire on the cruise missile, then it was going to fall into the sea rather than fall on land. It's possible to overstate these difficulties, partly because the Russians don't really care if a few bombs fall in the wrong place, even if they were to kill a few Russian soldiers or Ukrainian civilians in Russian occupied territory. That's not going to result in any inquiries in the Russian system. They don't really mind. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to effectively defend against these glide bombs on the front lines because the Russians can launch from far enough back. While Ukraine has had some successes in essentially ambushing these high-level glide bomb attacking flights with putting Patriot launchers very close to the front lines and the radar relatively close to the front lines, in order to essentially come on at the right moment and rapidly engage those Russian aircraft as they come in at high level, quite far back, where they think they're safe. Ukraine has also lost 2 Patriot launchers, which, to a UAV which found them and directed a ballistic missile in. Essentially, it is very risky with extremely scarce assets that are desperately needed to defend Ukrainian cities, power infrastructure, factories. So it's not a sustainable answer across the front. It's a way to impose some losses on the Russians sometimes and keep them relatively far back, but it's not the answer. The only other real answers are to go after the aircraft on the ground, so to conduct attacks on Russian air bases, with UAVs, special forces. Much more easily said than done. Other way of approaching this, and I think this is where probably Western efforts should focus if they're looking specifically at countering glide bombs, because it will also help counter a load of other things, is more operational level or even tactical level electronic warfare equipment to essentially jam and degrade the GPS and GLONASS signals which the bombs rely on for their guidance. It won't stop the bombs, but you can significantly degrade their level of accuracy to the point where they're not particularly effective.
But did the glide bombs decide the Battle of Avdiivka in favor of the Russians?
I don't think that the glide bombs were decisive in the Ukrainian decision to withdraw from Avdiivka. I mean, the biggest problem that they've had is simply shortage of ammunition for artillery and barrels. And that fundamentally comes down to the freezing of US large-scale aid and the failure of European countries to invest in sufficient production capacity for ammunition in 2022. But essentially, the shortage of artillery ammunition led to far more of the Russian infantry assaults, and it was mostly vehicles taking infantry to kind of step-off points relatively close to Ukrainian lines, and then infantry making those assaults. If you have lots of artillery ammunition, as Ukraine had through most of last year, then you can break up those assaults, inflict huge amounts of casualties, but also crucially suppress and kind of force them to spread out. What was happening for most of the beginning of this year, January, February, and through a lot of March, is that a lot more of those Russian infantry were having to be repelled essentially hand-to-hand with grenades and small arms. That's a massively more costly way of defending defense lines in terms of Ukrainian casualties. The decision to withdraw from Avdiivka when it was made was entirely the right one, because it was becoming disproportionately costly to hold.
And the big question, are glide bombs going to win the war for Russia?
That will essentially still come down to 2 things. One, can Ukraine continue to mobilize and train enough people to replace losses? Currently the line is very thinly held because losses have been high and training and mobilization has not kept pace over the last 6 months. But also artillery ammunition. It's amazing with all of the kind of innovative technology, innovative approaches to everything from UAVs, training, employment of glide bombs, air power, standoff munitions, air defense. All of these things are important, But ultimately, the war seems to be being decided at the moment, one way or the other, by howitzer shells and barrels to fire them.
That's where this tape stops, but we'll be back soon to play you through another episode of War on Tape. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you want more videos like this in your feed, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.